I'm Michael Peters, sports editor of the Tulsa World, sitting alongside Dave Sittler, columnist of the Tulsa World. And here's another edition of Sports Extra on Demand. It's Red River Week, and so being sort of an outsider, being from A&M, I can only sort of, marginally talk to the rivalry. But rivalry games are so much fun and so entertaining. From your perspective, and just tell people what it is like to be in the Cotton Bowl on that day, and how meaningful a game is it for Oklahoma fans?
Well, it's amazing if you've never been there. I don't know if you can get the whole sense of it when you watch it on TV, but to see a stadium divided right down the middle, burnt orange, crimson, or red, whatever OU wants to call it, and now they've increased the seating where they can go almost 100,000 people, and then set in the middle of the Texas State Fair. It's the most unique setting I've ever seen. I haven't been to every rivalry game, but I think when you take all that into account, Michael, it's got to be within the top one or two rivalries football-wise in college football. And to Oklahoma fans, it means everything. I have been there. I walked out one time with Gary Gibbs when he got beer poured on. He said, by an OU fan after the game, that's how much it means. That's how sick some fans get. That was Gary. Gary couldn't beat Texas, couldn't beat Nebraska, couldn't beat Colorado, and that was his undoing. But it's a real pride thing for OU people because of Texas's arrogance. There's no doubt about Texas arrogance. Now, in the Tulsa World today, John Hoover had a very good interview with the Lost Dodds. He says that game is more important to Texas than A&M. I'm sure you would argue with that, but it is an important game. And the fact that this one is great because they're both undefeated. That's what you want, both nationally ranked. And I look forward to this. Will be probably about my 26th game, I think, down there.
That's what I say. I've only been to one of those games, and so it's a great setting in the state fair, and it's great. I know that as an A&M fan, you don't like to hear that A&M is not the main rival of the University of Texas, but from a reality standpoint, you know that. And I think we had talked about this, and I've kind of blogged about this somewhat along the way, that from a recruiting standpoint, this game has been so huge for Oklahoma all through the years, and it's been so huge to kind of set this, because I grew up in the state of Texas, and until the Big 12 began, I was not that familiar with, say, like Oklahoma State or with Colorado or with Nebraska. But you know who Oklahoma is because you see that game every single week. So I guess talk a little bit about, you got a chance to go over there this week. What is the vibe coming from Oklahoma this week?
Now, first, I was going to say I grew up on Nebraska football, and I always thought OU Nebraska was a big game, and then I ended up covering it several years. But when I came down to Oklahoma and went to that first game down there, I realized this is the game. And I think Texas A&M, Texas was kind of like OU Nebraska. It was one of those deals. The vibe down there this week, I've never seen Coach Stoops this loose in my life before an OU Texas game. Now, whether he's putting on a really good face or he knows he's got something going on, I think it's the latter, because he, before this season, said, it's time we win another national championship. So if I'm an OU fan, I'm pretty encouraged by that. I would think I was on the radio a little bit ago, and I've said I can't decide if OU is going to win by 14 or 54 or somewhere in between there. That'll make Texas fans real happy. But to me, the whole key to the game is OU's defense some way getting to those young quarterbacks. And if they can do that, they got to shut down their running game. And Texas has showed in these last few games that they have a bit of a running game, and those quarterbacks have played well. But, Michael, you can't describe the atmosphere. I thought Mac Brown told a real good story this week on the teleconference. He said when his tight end, Bo Scaife, was a freshman, he was standing by him in the middle of the field before the game, and he says, this is incredible, Coach. I think I'm going to hyperventilate. And Mac says, gee, thanks for telling me that. Well, if some of those other players feel that way early in the game, OU could really jump on them. But Landry Jones, always had the Landry Jones factor.
Right.
He almost fumbled away the game last year. A lot of Landry Jones fans don't want to hear that, but Landry Jones has got to prove to me, if he throws a couple of Landry Jones type passes right to Texas defensive backs, the game's on then.
Well, see, and we always have a bit of a mutual admiration society here when we do this, and one day we won't. But I agree with you. Like, I agree with you kind of on the whole route. Texas has had a good year, and it's been a good start for the Longhorns. But you go back, hey, UCLA is not very strong. BYU not good at all, and they had to struggle at home.
Right.
Now, hey, look, Colt McCoy's brother seems to maybe have some of the it factor. Ash seems to give him a little bit of a counterbalance to it when they bring him in. Malcolm Brown seems to have been a strong addition. He from San Antonio. I got to watch him last year in the Texas high school playoffs last year, and he's a strong running back. They turned over Iowa State 3 times early in the first half to really run away. I agree with you. I think if Oklahoma turns it over a couple of times early and lets them stay in the game, I think this could be a really good game, and Texas has a chance to win this game. Otherwise, I don't really see that these teams match up that well, and otherwise I would see that, like you, I think Oklahoma, once again, for recreational purposes, the number is like about 9.5 or so that I've seen. I would think that Oklahoma would stay, beyond that number if all things go according to plan. I guess interesting enough, you talk about John Hoover and his and the lost odds stuff. I thought was just fascinating today.
Tremendous.
You wrote about it today too. I mean, is some of the hate back? I mean, I've seen the pictures of Barry Switzer with the Beat Texas hat on from from his era, which I think which is awesome. Is it good if there's a little animosity in the rivalry? Is it bad when people get along too much? I mean, what makes this game a better game?
Well, I think the hate back then was bad. It was everybody knew about it except the President of the United States, Gerald Ford, who walked out to the middle of the field with Coach Switzer and Coach Royal, who weren't speaking to each other. Now, that was the spying incident. I think this is a different kind of hate. Maybe this is more of a disgust on IU's part that Texas does run the Big 12. And they've proven it lately. They may kill the Big 12. So this is more of just an anger that how can this school continually get away with this? And so this is the only chance Texas, anybody in the Big 12 Oklahoma or anybody in the Big 12 has to get back at Texas is on the field to play. And I think the fans crave that more than anybody, although I think one of the side stories in this game is Brent Venables gets a chance to go against the offensive coordinator that embarrassed him in the Fiesta Bowl.
Very interesting, yes.
And Brent Venables hasn't said much this week. And the other thing I would watch is Texas' secondary is thin because of injuries. And I've never seen OU have this many good receivers. And so if Jones throws it to them, 54 points.
Yeah, that could be very interesting. Now, speaking of the Big 12, and like I say, we're now, once again, Big 12 held hostage day, 100 and whatever. So Missouri, made the same announcement that all of their other brethren have made kind of in this process. We're going to go look at our options. Is that a call to arms for Missouri, do we think, now for the SEC? Or is there any way to talk them back into this now?
Well, in talking to the sources I have at Missouri and some of the fellow media people that I really trust there, they think that Missouri is definitely going to leave. And a couple of weeks ago, they didn't think that. And I'm not sure exactly what changed it. Just like A&M, I think that they're upset with Texas and they're looking for stability. So I think it'll happen. And then as I wrote in a blog today, I would hope that the Big 12 becomes very proactive right away and goes out and rebuilds this conference to 12 teams. Now, DeLoss Dodds wants 10, so DeLoss Dodds will probably get what he wants. But you're hearing that TCU maybe is back in the mix. BYU's definitely in it. Maybe Louisville, maybe West Virginia. Now, to me, none of those teams replace A&M and Missouri and Nebraska. Colorado doesn't bother me. They're gone.
Well, no, I agree with that. I don't know that they necessarily replace them straight up. But, you go look what happened to the Big East when they were rated by the ACC and lost a really strong component of their conference. You pick up a Louisville, you pick up a Cincinnati, and now all of a sudden those teams are BCS worthy all of a sudden. And so
Right.
I do think that the Big 12, I think like you say, if they are proactive in realignment and they come back and gather people as soon as they can and come out and say, look, Missouri, whatever, we really like them to stay, but they're gone. So we're going to get BYU, we're going to get TCU, we're going to get Louisville, we're going to get Cincinnati, and now we're back to 12 and we're going to be a player and we're going to sign off on 6 years worth of television rights to stabilize our league for 6 years. I think if that happens, then I think that you can at least give the perception that you are more sound now. Now that may not ever be a true reality, but at least you can give the perception, much the way the Big East did. And the Big East has been able to keep their qualifier throughout the entire process, even though as a league, the Mountain West is probably a better league.
Yes.
And even maybe some other leagues have arguments that there might be, even the WAC when Boise State's running through it might not be that much worse than the Big East, but they've kept their automatic qualifier status in the BCS just by expanding and making teams seem BCS worthy.
I think the critical question will be, if they do that, if they add those teams that you just mentioned, will the Fox people look at that and say, now wait a minute, that's not what we signed up for when we signed a 13-year, $1.7 billion contract.
And same thing with ABC and
then
ESPN coming up in a couple of years.
Right.
Right.
If those networks stay with the Big 12, stay committed, yeah, it's going to live. It's going to be fine. And I agree with you. And bringing up Cincinnati's one I didn't mention. I think they're in there. And, you look at that Louisville in basketball. Rick Pitino doesn't want to come, but he can come and play one of his proteges, Travis Ford. But I think you're right. The perception, give it time, and it could be fine. I guess, the people that say Texas and OU can make any league live, I guess that's true. But you really got to have more than just that.
You have to have Oklahoma State staying at the level that they are. You need a Texas Tech to pick back up. You need either Kansas State, which after this weekend against Baylor might be, maybe Bill Snyder's weaving his magic again. You've got to have some of that. We had a good story. John Hoover had a story in Sunday's paper about the breakdown of the league and the money. And that's what the key is. If the Fox folks stay along, if ESPN comes along in a couple of years, you can sell to Louisville and to Cincinnati and to West Virginia and to BYU and those schools a significantly greater share of revenue from the conference than they are going to get in staying with the Big East, and that's money talks. We now back to a little bit of football now, real quick before we go. What do you make of Oklahoma State? I think I said in the blog earlier that OSU might be able to run out empty uniforms against Kansas this week and perhaps still win the game. I mean, do you see any way that juggernaut gets sidetracked this week?
No. I covered Turner Gill when he was a quarterback at Nebraska, and I think a lot of him, but it's amazing how that program has fallen so fast from what Mangino had. No, Oklahoma State's going to run this one, and you've heard of the Texas two-step? Well, Texas is going to have the Oklahoma two-step done on it. This week by the Sooners and next week by the Cowboys in Austin. And then when that happens, and if Oklahoma State, I think they can win at Missouri. They showed me a lot at A&M. We're going to have what we wanted, that dream scenario. We're going to have it on December 3rd. Bedlam, undefeated teams playing for the Big 12 title. I think I'm really impressed with Oklahoma State. And I think, as I wrote the other day, they've got to start pushing Whedon, I think, for the Heisman there. That'll be interesting to watch, too. But they have really, I give Mike Gundy total credit. He has changed, in my eyes, the face of the attitude of that program.
And that's a real key because, like I say, I was impressed with him against A&M at halftime, very calm. You saw him, he did a good accounting of himself. He got to do the ESPN dance last this week. Not only the YouTube dance, but the ESPN dance. He got to go up there and spend all weekend up there and basically pretty much a 15-minute commercial for Oklahoma State between every break and every college game, and you really can't overstate that. No. Like you say, I was a big fan of Turner Gill. He did a great job at Buffalo turning it around. I thought he was a great hire for Kansas, and now it looks like he might lose his job before they even get to make any sort of movement on it. Well,
yeah, Turner is a protege of Tom Osborne, but he's put some restrictions in there now that I think are hurting recruiting. Just things he won't let players do off the field. And I understand he's a very straight arrow guy. I agree with a lot of he's doing, but I think it's hurting recruiting. I hope he gets it done. I hope he gets it turned around because, like you said, we got to have some more of these Big 12 teams play like BCS teams. But before we go, I want one last thing. Free Dom Whaley. Give him a scholarship, Bob Stoops. Find a way to do it.
We'll debate Dom Whaley next week when we have a little bit
All
more
right.
time.
All
That's
right.
all we've got this time for Sports Extra On Demand. Please join us next week.